Good day, gentlemen. Now, most women, under the right circumstances, love and enjoy a good old-fashioned spanking.
Yes, we do.
So today, in this video, myself and Maria will be demonstrating 3 excellent techniques for spanking and some of the do's and don'ts. So let's get into it. Are you ready?
Yep.
First thing we need to look at is our positioning and targeting. So if I'm working with a woman who's standing, the areas that I want to strike is at the pocket of where the jeans pockets would be, and then also underneath the cheek here. All right, so we've got this impact point here and this impact point here. What we want to avoid is over the butt bone, the ischial tuberosity. Now, if she's padded, it'll be okay, but basically we want to make sure that we're not bruising or hitting over the bone, right? So we have this target here, always remember that. If she's bent over and on all fours, then the butt bone is going to stick out more, so this is even more important. When she's standing, you know, the butt is loose, so you'll have greater margin for error, but may as well get your targeting correctly. Next thing we want to look at is the angle. Right now, currently she's just standing directly, you know, up and down, which is fine, but what we want to do is actually pop the butt out. So what I've done is I've moved my hand over to the side, gripped onto the pelvis bone itself, and then just angled her out, right? So in this way, this pops the butt, so it's a better targeting area, as opposed to if she has her hips like this. The most important thing when it comes to spanking, like there are all sorts of intricate, awesome ways that we can spank a butt, but none of these are going to work if we don't have correct form. And the primary thing that you need to understand when it comes to spanking is a looseness in your wrist. Because bad spanking is worse than no spanking at all. And bad spanking comes from a wooden thud-like strike. So if I have rigidity in my fingers and or in my wrist, then when I hit, sorry about this one, it's going to hit with this dead, flat and rigid surface, which if I do that with a lot of power is going to end up bruising and hurting, right? The point of spanking is not to randomly hurt the woman, it's to create dispersed impact and sensation that spreads over the cheek area and with the right type of force will actually send a shock wave through her pelvis into her pussy, right? So you can turn a woman on definitely by spanking, but you can certainly turn her off as well if I'm thudding away with a rigid arm. And you can see in this incorrect technique, I'm pushing from the deltoids, from the bicep, tricep. I'm using my arm strength to deliver the strike, which means that I'm not sensitive and it's completely unnecessary use of force and then leads to this wooden thud that's not pleasant. So instead, what I'm looking at is this kind of jellyfish octopus action going on in my wrist, right? So, or like a gimbal, essentially, right? So I want to have this looseness, and the same with my fingers is that my fingers are splayed and that they are relaxed, right? So there's no rigidity in the hand, it's relaxed. It's not limp, right? I'm not like that. That's not going to be good. So I spread the fingers and then I relax them, right? So that as I have this, well, our number 1 type of spank, which is our just basic spank, right? As the hand and palm lands on the surface, it all hits in one go. And you'll know you've got it right when you get a good slappy noise, right? So here you can see that I'm using extremely small amount of force, right? I'm not using any strength. I'm not trying to, accelerate. I'm more or less using the flow and gravity in this way here, that as it lands, pop onto the surface, the impact is spread across my palm and fingers all in one go. And this is your standard basic spank. Can be used firstly as a warm-up spank. So if you're going to spank someone, let's say you've turned them around, you're kissing, and you're saying some naughty things in her ear. This I might be doing first as a preparation spank. So it's not designed yet to have any major shock, but it's going to bring blood to the surface of the skin. So it's basically warming up the surface area, which is pretty important. Like rarely would you want to go with a full force hit as the first hit. So having half a dozen to a dozen of these warm-up spanks, which also allows you to fit to the shape of the individual woman's body because they're all slightly different, and to really relax and get into the flow of it. And then if I want to increase the impact, all I do is basically create more distance to get a longer strike, which leads to a proper spank, like that. Another important thing when spanking is to be aware of not just the stroke, but dispersing of the sensation, right? Because certainly as I increase and do more repetitions, I'm creating a painful sensation. It's not excruciating and it should be pleasurable, obviously, otherwise what's the point? But if I just continue to spank, then I'm going to reach a point where she's reached a saturation of sensation. So what I'll do is interdispersed with the strikes will be dispersal strokes, which is basically rubbing, right? When you bump your elbow on something and it hurts, you rub it because it makes it feel better. So if I get a few warm-up strikes and then I give a good one, then what I'm going to do is this dispersal rubbing. And this is good because we can, from two reasons, to disperse any pain, but also to create anticipation and for it to be sexy, right? So it'll be pretty robotic and clinical if my spanking session with a girl is just on the metronome, you know, doing this for some amount of time. She's going to get bored and wonder why I'm doing this, right? It has to think of it like she is your musical instrument and you're here to create sensation and emotion through the variations that you do. So even if you just use this one simple spanking technique, which is actually more than enough, I mean, it's great to have some other fancy ones, you don't necessarily need them, but in between my harder hits, dispersing, grasping, you know, running a hand up the inside of the leg, up the back, right? So we've got all this area that we can create sensation as opposed to just only focusing in on the butt. Okay, so you've got your basic spank, but it's more difficult than it appears. When teaching the sex classes, I find that spanking is the thing that guys suck at the most. Right? It takes the most repetitions for them to actually get it right. A lot of guys are really stiff in their upper bodies from doing gym work or just linear movements, not dancing or flowing in any way. So you do need to practice this, and you can do it on any curved surface, on a ham, on a watermelon, on a sand dune, you know, anything that's curved, to actually practice getting this flow and it landing with this nice slap noise. Until you've done that, I wouldn't move on to the next technique, but let's move on to the next technique. Now, this is an awesome one. It's called the Spank grab, Spank plus grab. So the way that it works, I'll do it slow motion to start with, is we're coming in now low, right? So before we were hitting in this position on the top of the butt primarily, right? Or we can go under as well, remembering we've got impact point 1, impact point 2. For this spank, we're going underneath the cheek. It has the same dynamic in terms that it's relaxed and flexible, loose in the wrist. And what I'm doing is I'm landing the spank under the cheek, then I grip and lift, and that all happens in one moment, right? So basically, is how it works. So that as the impact came, this pushes the flesh in, and as it's bouncing back, you know, in less than a second, I grip it and lift a little bit, right? So this has a very different sensation from the one where it's bouncing off, basically, creating this sting and dispersal, to the impact being embedded into the body, right? So it's a much more like pleasantly shocking moment, very, very dominant. Right, so you see it's spank, grip, lift, all in one go. So there's our warm-up spanks, basic number 1 spank, and then grip, spank and grip. All right, this is one that I'm not going to be doing a dozen times in a row. It's really like an accent or a crescendo point for a spanking session. Right, so once again, if we've got our initial basic warm-up to get the blood to the surface to warm up the surface area, then maybe I increase, do some heavier basic spank hits, and maybe I'm building a bit more anticipation, and then I go for my spank and grabs. Your spank technique number 3 is the glancing strike. Now this is quite an advanced type of spank, so make sure you've got the other 2 down before you venture into this territory. But the way this one works is quite different. Instead of embedding impact to the center of mass, what you're doing is you're actually lifting and glancing. So it's like a shearing, slicing stroke instead, right? So it works like this. Okay, so what makes this difficult is that I have to get my targeting exactly right, because if I do that, I'm going to miss, and if I'm too close, then I'm going to just embed into the flesh. So what I'm doing is I actually rotate my wrist a little bit outwards, and so it comes across the curve of the body, and there's different, there'll be different angles that'll work on depending on the shape of the woman, also depending on which position you're in. But from here, it works to glance here and then lift up the flesh, right? So we've got that, spank like this. So we can do it either through the center of the hand, where it's like basically the whole hand is doing the lift, or an easier version is to do it just through the fingertips, right? So that's where the fingertips lift and then kind of wipe and flick off, right? So we've got that, spank and lift. Or we've got the full hand motion, which is harder to do to get it in exactly the right position, whereas the finger flick one works very easily, where I'm shearing in, lift the fingers up, and then flick them off at the last second. So this creates more of a stinging sensation as opposed to a thudding kind of shock wave, which the other type of normal spank or the spank and grab will create this shock through the pelvis. This one creates more of a momentary sting. So this is again not a spank technique that I'm going to do dozens of reps of. It's an accent, right? Because it can hurt in a good way, right? It's a little bit of a shock, so we might be doing multiple reps of our basic spanks, remembering our dispersals, and then some of these lifting flick spanks, maybe finishing there with a spank and grab. So that's a good combination of different types of spanks that's going to create a broad range of sensations, so it doesn't get predictable or boring, but we're not going to be too heavily emphasizing especially the stinging techniques, because it's just going to fatigue and it's going to get annoying over time. So there you have your three basic, well, not basic, but your three special spank techniques. Basic spank, which looks basic but is relatively advanced really in terms of your body mechanics and your physical awareness in relation to her. So remembering, as I've said before, that this is not as easy as it looks. Most men suck at this, most men are wooden, most men are using too much force. Get the bounce, let her butt bounce your hand basically off. Increase the distance if we want to get it heavier, remembering our strokes to disperse, create anticipation, turn her on. This is all sexy stuff, but don't do it like this, right? You're not rubbing a smudge off a mirror or something. Make it sexy, ass worship, enjoy the whole area. Spank and grab, spank, grab. Basic spanks, glancing strikes. That'll be a good combination. Good old spanking, one of my favorite things to do. Coming out tomorrow is part 2 in this little series where myself and Maria will take your spanking techniques onto the bed and into your sexual play. Awesome stuff, so stay tuned for that. And very important reminder, which is that the Master Lover Toolkit is now open for enrollments. Lots of guys have already joined and it's starting on the first week of the material, and you only have 5 days left to join this course, after which I'll be closing the cart and moving on to coaching the guys who signed up. Master Lover Toolkit is your all-in-one 5-week comprehensive step-by-step guide to becoming a master lover. In over 50 instructional explicit modules, I take you through the full range of techniques as well as theoretical understanding that you need to become a 1% lover. Covering everything from the basics of foreplay, arousal, different types of touch and application of pressure and penetration to the pussy, right through to advanced sexual technique and dabbling into frequency, intimacy, and tantric sex, and right through to the rough stuff as well. There is no course like this on the planet. I've been working on this for decades in research, and the last 5 years teaching it live, and have now condensed this down into a streamlined, extremely practical toolkit for a man to go from wherever he is, inexperienced, mediocre, average, or even advanced, to becoming a literal sex god. So if you'd like to join this completely unique world-class coaching program and have me as your personal mentor along the journey, then now is your chance. You only have 5 days left to join. After that, enrollments close and I move on to coaching the guys in the course. So do not delay. There's a whole range of amazing bonuses that are also available right now. So for full details, click the link below. It'll take you to a page which explains everything in full detail. And I hope to see you in the course. See you tomorrow for part 2 of the old slap and tickle. James Marshall signing out. Peace.